Fleischzeit, der Podcast rund um die Carnivore Ernährung mit wertvollen Praxistipps, Informationen zu Gesundheit und nachhaltigem Fleischkonsum.
Unser Partner heißt jetzt carnivoro.eu und bietet Supplemente rund um die Carnivore Ernährung in höchster Bio-Weidequalität. Es gibt dort wertvolle Innereien wie getrocknete Leber, Herz, Milz, Knochenmark oder einen Innereienmix. Nicht nur die Mineralien, sondern auch die Vitamine sind durch die schonende Gefriertrocknung zu 95% erhalten. Das Verhältnis von Vitaminen und Mineralien ist in Innereien perfekt auf unseren Körper abgestimmt, da es sich um ein natürliches Lebensmittel handelt, das unsere Vorfahren über Jahrtausende konsumiert haben. Auch die Aufnahme durch unseren Körper erfolgt auf natürliche Weise gegenüber Nahrungsergänzungsmitteln, die isoliert hergestellt werden und häufig Zusätze enthalten. So gibt es auch Knochenbrühe in praktischer Pulverform zum Auflösen, auch ohne Zusätze, ganz natürlich mit einem hohen Anteil an Kollagen. Sichere dir jetzt mit dem Code CARNITARIER 5% Rabatt auf deinen ersten Einkauf.
Ja, herzlich willkommen. Ihr seht, wir sind heute in einer großen Runde. Herzlich willkommen zu einem neuen Fleischzeit-Interview und wir sind eben ganz, ganz glücklich, dass wir den berühmtesten Carnivore der Welt zu Besuch haben, nämlich Shawn Baker. Und deshalb werden wir heute auch eine Folge auf Englisch aufnehmen. Ich werde aber mich darum kümmern, dass wir einen deutschen Untertitel bekommen. That's why. Now I'm going to switch to English and I'm very happy to welcome the most famous carnivore in the world, with whom I've got something in common. He's born German, I'm born American. We're both carnivores. I'm the carnivore representative in Germany, he in the States, or actually also worldwide. And we want to talk about how we can also, work on the whole carnivore movement. We want to unite more and more. We want to get stronger. We're actually starting with a kind of a revolution, and that's why it's great that we connect. Welcome, Shawn.
Well, danke schön. Glad to be here. I'm very happy to. I guess I'm a bit embarrassed because I was born here, but my German is not very good. So I was only here. I was here till I was 1 year of age, and I can speak everything I learned at the age of 1. So.
Mama,
so
Papa. That would
Mama,
be.
Papa, yeah. Opa, Oma.
Yeah, you're going to hold a speech this afternoon. What is the title?
I forgot what it was. It was something about No, I think it was a therapeutic indications for a carnivore diet. So something along. Reiner had given me sort of a generalized framework to talk from, and so I think the title came at the end, and I don't even remember what it is. But
yeah, the official title is The Carnivore Diet in Health and Disease.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Thanks, Reiner.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you go ahead and ask a question.
Ask a question. Okay, so Shawn, when did you switch to carnivore and why?
Yeah, so I switched 2016. So in fact, this next month will be starting my 8th year. I did it purely, really, for thoughts on athletic performance, actually. That was my motivation for this, because I've been an athlete my whole life. I was already low carb. I was on a ketogenic diet at that time. I ran across a group of people online doing what they called a zero carb diet at the time. And my first impression, they were only eating meat, and I thought that sounded very crazy, which everybody thinks when they first hear that. And, but I was sort of had enough fascination, kind of a morbid fascination, to watch these folks. And then after about 6 months, they started to make sense to me, because I'd already kind of realized that fat is not something we need to fear, that, probably some of the the processed foods are really a problem. And I thought, well, why not try that? And so I did. My first attempt was just one meal. I think I had like bacon and eggs for breakfast and nothing else. And I said, that's not so bad. I could do that. And then I did 1 day, and then I did 2 days, and I did a week and 2 weeks, and finally I did a month in 2016. And that was kind of my sort of official foray into carnivore. And then at the end of the month, I legitimately felt quite good. But I then went back to my regular diet, which was kind of mixed everything, and I immediately felt worse. And I said, well, I don't really like feeling bad. Okay. I like feeling good. So I persisted on for up to a year. I said, well, I'll try it for a year. And I remember my partner at the time was asking me, how long do you think you're going to do this? I said, well, maybe a year. I'll see if I can do it. And then 1 year led to 2 to 3 to 5 and so on and so forth. And then that led to me going on something called the Joe Rogan podcast, which was seen by quite a few people and kind of started this, I guess, this carnivore movement. Because like I said, I was a person that actually named it carnivore. That was my sort of contribution. I wrote a book, Carnivore Diet. They call it the Fleisch, what do they call it here?
Fleischfresser Diät is your book, the title of your book.
Okay. And so that was my introduction. But it was actually to improve my athletic performance, because I was reading about how athletes back, earlier times had used meat primarily as a performance enhancement. And it actually worked quite well. I got stronger. My power out. I was at the time rowing, doing competitive rowing, and I was the American record holder, and so I was already quite good. But as soon as I went carnivore, within 6 months, I got, I think, I calculated I put out 8% more power in 6 months, which is very at that level, it's a high amount. So I broke 3 world records, and then went on to win world championships and all that stuff with that. So it was. Initially my goal was athletic performance, but now I've seen so much benefit for all the health indications we might talk about.
And there was no transition phase where you noticed a decline in athletic performance? Did you immediately feel stronger?
No, I think that took about 3 months, I think. Okay. I think the first month I had transitions. I had a little bit of a headache. I think it was just due to fluid and electrolyte shifts. And I just continued to press on with my training. I didn't cut back. I kind of forced my body to adapt to it. And I remember specifically, just as an objective measure, I was doing the deadlift, and I was using, 405 pounds, which is 180 kilos or something like that. And my goal was to do it for 20 repetitions. And for 5 years I've been trying. I could never get past about 15 or 16 repetitions. And I think within 2-3 months, I'd done 18, and then I did 20, and I was like, I've hit my goal. And it was strictly due to the dietary change, because my training hadn't changed at all. Mm-hmm. So I got stronger, and then I translated into the rowing records. And so, it's my belief that for athletes, I think for the average person, a month, maybe 2 months to adapt, but when you put the athletic demands on there, particularly depending on what kind of sport it is, it may take 6 months or more to fully adapt.
Mm. Okay.
My question would be, who was the healthiest human you've ever seen in your life, and what was the lifestyle, and how was the diet?
Goodness, that's interesting. Who is the healthiest human I've ever seen in my life? I don't know that I could think about that. It's interesting. I just recently I became aware of a gal named Maggie White. She's a rancher in Alberta, Canada, and she is 82 years of age. She could easily pass for someone in her perhaps 50s. She's very physically fit. She's been on a carnivore diet now for 65 years. In the talk I'll talk about her a little bit. And she is not only young physically, but young mentally. And she's like, at 82, learning a new language, going to, move to, I think, South America to start a ranch down there and some of these things. So it's interesting, but it's hard to say who's to me, when you define health, what is health? What do you mean by healthy? And there's many people have different definitions of that, but for me, it means, you're physically vigorous, you're mentally still intact, and you can perform at a level that, it's easy to be healthy when you're 20. It's harder to be healthy when you're 60, 70, 80, I think. And I think that's where the real differences come out. So you tend to look towards older people that are living well. There was a guy named Charles Euster, who I hadn't met, but he was a low-carb guy. He was 96. It set the world record for sprinting. And so I like to see these older athletes, I think, are going to be the best examples of healthy aging. And one thing I will say is that irrespective of your dietary choice, whether it's carnivore or vegan or whatever it might have been, I think the biggest difference that I see with people that age healthy are the people that engage in exercise. And as much as I'm a proponent of carnivore, I'm just as big of a proponent of exercise, resistance training, cardiovascular training. I think those things, they should go hand in hand and together. I think you end up with excellent health.
Thank you. A short following question. What do you think is the maximum health lifespan of a human?
Goodness, that's an interesting one. Well, I mean, we know historically, I think I think her name is Jean Calmet in France, lived to 122. There's some questionable people that say they've lived to 140 and things like that. The human lifespan in general has been about 80 years from the beginning of time. You know, we can go back to the days of the ancient Greeks. We can look at guys like, I think Plato and some of these other guys living to their 80s. You know, we've got records of, maybe Benjamin Franklin living into his 80s, some of our American folks. Interestingly, when we always hear about prehistoric man, they say, well, they died at 30, so that we don't care what they did. But the reality is they didn't die at 30. The overall life expectancy of the population was low because so many children died at a young age. They had high infant mortality rates. And when we look at the fossil records, there's certainly records of prehistoric humans living into their 6th, 7th, and perhaps 8th decade. So I think 80 is kind of the natural limit. Now, can we extend that beyond that? I think to some degree. I mean, we've achieved most of life extension through hygiene, you know, clean water supply, access to adequate nutrition. I think what we see is less people dying early of sort of unnatural things, infections, traumas, and things like that, which we would have died much earlier. But I don't know what the overall life expectancy, ultimate lifespan of a human might be. I know there's a lot of people that will tell you they think they're going to live to 180, and I'm very skeptical. I want to see the proof before I buy off on that. And so I don't, as a matter of course, I don't think or say that carnivore diet is going to make people live longer, because I just don't know, and I don't think anybody really does. And so my focus is getting people healthy where they are today, and that's usually going to result in a better quality of life. And probably if you stay healthy, you're probably going to live longer. But again, there's no guarantees here. I'd like to certainly, you know, I think 80 is something you can reasonably expect. Anything beyond that becomes a bonus, only if you live in a way that you're still vigorous. Because I've met a lot of 100-year-old people, and every one of them was being wheeled in on a stretcher with a diaper with a broken hip and being demented, and that to me is not a good life worth living. So you've got to obviously couple health span and lifespan together. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. Maybe carnivore will make us all live to 120. We don't know. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and well, because you just said about that farmer's lady that she's also very vigorous in her mind, and I told you about the problem we had 2 weeks ago with the dementia, that we had somebody being tricked in my family. Do you experience a lot of positive changes with seniors having maybe Alzheimer's or dementia? Do you get reports about that?
We are starting to. In fact, I just did an interview with a guy named Hal Cramner, who runs nursing homes in Arizona in the United States, and he is implementing carnivore protocols on his clients. And he just had a lady that was sent there for dementia. She could not live independently. Mm-hmm. She could barely walk. She could not care for any of her daily needs. And they put her on carnivore. They coupled some exercise. And now she is completely back to normal. So that she's, you know, I think if you catch it early enough, there's a chance that you can sort of slow down the progression or reverse it to a degree. There's a guy named Dale Bredesen who's I think he's at UCSF in California, that has been doing research on ketogenic style diets and their utilization for dementia. So I do think that diet absolutely has an impact on our brain health. And it completely makes sense. I mean, why would our brain be any different than any other organ in our body? So certainly diet's going to have an impact on that. And I think one of the things is we are going to see, as diabetes increases, we're going to see accelerating rates of dementia. And as you know, until we start recognizing the role of metabolic health as an overall marker of health, we're going to see dementia growing in numbers, and that becomes a very, very costly problem to deal with. It's not cheap to provide dementia care. Yeah, right. Because they have to be taken care of 24/7, and as you said, dementia, and we also say it's a type 3 diabetes, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, do you want to say? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question that is interesting for myself personally as an athlete. First of all, how many training sessions do you place into a week? So what's your usual training schedule, and how do you time your meals in association with the training? For example, do you hold a certain period of time where you don't eat anything prior to training, and what do you eat after workout?
Well, right now my meals are basically based around when I can do it, when it's convenient. Yeah. So that it's not my primary consideration. I think really, probably if you eat adequate amounts of food, adequate amounts of protein, that's going to take care of probably 90%. By structuring the time and frequency, you may have a small impact on that. When we look at, like, for instance, when we're consuming carbohydrates, we know that the onset of the effect is pretty rapid. We have a rapid rise in glucose, and we can time that, and that's why a lot of people do that as so-called as a pre-workout. However, when you're eating, protein and fat, that response is delayed quite a bit. So, for instance, when I had won the World Championships in rowing, I had a 3-pound tomahawk ribeye about 4 hours prior to my competition, because I knew that would give me that would coincide with the sort of the nutrition hitting my bloodstream. So there's some of those considerations. I typically train pretty much every day. I mean, particularly as you get older, you can ill afford to take off more time because it's harder to maintain that, I find. So I'm not specifically training for any one particular goal currently, but so my workouts look like a couple of strength training sessions a week, some hypertrophy work, so to maintain muscle mass. I think it's very important to maintain cardiorespiratory fitness. So I do a lot of HIIT style, high intensity interval training, sprint interval training, bike sprints, running sprints, rowing sprints, and then I also include a lot of what I call explosive type work, jumping, throwing, so I can maintain the elasticity and the ability to move quickly. Because I think, as we get older, I use the analogy of, if a bear was going to chase you and eat you, and you can't get away, and if there's 10 people in a room, whoever's going to get caught by the bear is usually the same person that's going to die from chronic disease. You think about it. What keeps us young and vibrant and springing and our tissue quality so we can do that? And that largely is lifestyle. And those same things that allow us to function as we did when we were younger. As a kid, you can run and play and jump and do flips and all that stuff. And as an adult, if you can't do that, it's because your disease is progressing. You're aging. So I try to maintain those qualities. But I generally eat twice a day. I just try to make sure I get enough food, enough protein, enough calories, enough fat to fuel me. And then the timing of that is probably more due to convenience than anything else.
It's secondary.
It is secondary. Yeah, it's like I said. I think I think if you just get enough, that's going to cover the vast majority. Now there's data out there that show, like, for instance, muscle building, 2 doses of protein throughout the day is probably superior to 1. Mm-hmm. 3 maybe slightly more superior to 2. The effect starts to wear off after the second dose. So probably eating 2 meals a day is probably quite adequate for 99% of the people. And that's what I find, that's what naturally occurs on a carnivore diet for a lot of people. It's just kind of this twice a day meal pattern. Sometimes I'll do 1, but sometimes I'll have 4, but it just depends.
Yeah, and all these studies in athletes that were done in people who regularly eat also carbohydrates or not really a carnivore diet. So I think it's hard to translate those.
Right, and I've talked to some of the top researchers, guys like Don Layman, who's arguably one of the largest or most prolific protein researchers. He discovered the impact of leucine on mTOR signaling and muscle protein synthesis. And so he says, we really have never studied someone who eats a big steak. We have no idea what it does because it's too expensive to do, quite honestly. So they always give people protein powder, and that's where they do their studies on protein. So my thought is that, when we consume a big steak, our body naturally slows everything down so it can extract all the nutrition from it. So we're getting this slow, steady input of amino acids and fats and things like that. Whereas if you consume carbohydrates, it's rapid on, rapid off. Same thing with protein powder, by the way. Protein powder is absorbed very rapidly. And to me, that's quite an unnatural response. We're not designed to eat powders. If you go out in the wild you would never run into powdered food. I mean, you couldn't make it. I mean, you might have to, if you chewed it for 6 hours maybe, but the way we can make powdered food and dramatically increase the surface area so alters the absorption characteristics of food that we have these sort of unnatural hormonal and responses to that. And so I think that's why we have so much problems with metabolic health. You know, it's interesting, like that, like flour, sugar, even protein powders. When you consume it in that form, it's rapidly absorbed by us. And we talk about the microbiome. Well, the microbiome normally, when we have whole intact foods, will take some of that. They'll consume some of that. And so now, one of the problems we have in the U.S. with such obesity rates, everybody's eating processed food. So our microbiome, which can consume up to 22% of our calories, is getting very little of that. So we're actually absorbing more than we used to. So even though in the United States, caloric consumption since about 1990 has not gone up, but obesity has. And it went up from the 60s to the 90s, and the people thought, well, they're eating more calories. But now the caloric intake is relatively flat, but the obesity rates continue to rise. It's because we're absorbing more, because it's all powderized food.
Okay, then I have a follow-up question. What do you think of exogenous ketones? They are also not natural for us.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about
Well, obviously they show up as blood ketones, and there's different products out there. There's the salt esters, and there's a new company that just formed a bioidentical ketone. The question is, what does going into ketosis do for the body? We know it has benefits. There's all kinds of research shows things like neuroinflammation, epilepsy, mood disorders. So we know that it has certain benefits to health. The question is it the absence of all these other things that allow you to go into ketosis, which is the actual benefit? And I don't think we really know that yet, as far as what's going on. So I think, if someone is unable to do a ketogenic diet, say maybe you have somebody with dementia that you just cannot get them to eat in a way, perhaps it has a benefit there. I think it's, they're quite expensive, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you can make them for free by dialing your diet in better. And do they have any extra benefits for maybe an athlete? There's some athletes that have used those. And so I just don't think we know, completely the answer to that yet. So I think there's still going to be some research coming out there. I am certainly open to it. I find anytime somebody says this one thing is the answer to all the problems, I'm skeptical right away. I think there's such a complexity there, and it very well be that ketones can have a positive role even exogenously, but in my mind, it's going to be secondary to the benefits you get from a diet that puts you in ketosis.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Next question for me. Imagine the following scenario. There is a magician who could cast a spell to rid the world of vegan ideology. In return, he demands that you, Mr. Baker, follow a vegan diet for 1 year. Would you agree to that?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think we need to get rid of vegan ideology. I think all ideas should be allowed to flourish, and people should be able to make their arguments, and arguments will stand up upon their own merit. I think censorship, and that's a form of censorship in my view, is awful. I think, as much as I disagree with veganism, I fully support the right to promote it, to talk about it, to discuss it. And I think, at the end, the truth will prevail ultimately. And it may be, and I know you had your issues with veganism and it wasn't successful for you. And I see a lot of people where it's not successful for. I see it every day, quite honestly. I think there are some people that are perfectly happy being vegan, and if they want to be happy, that's fine. But when they start saying you're evil, you're an animal killer, you're an animal abuser, and you should not be allowed, or it should be made illegal, I have a problem with that. So that aspect of it, I disagree with vehemently. But I've got no desire to go vegan. I'm not a masochist in any way. So yeah, I would not take that bet or that proposition, because I think
you wouldn't save the world and play the
well, but I don't think that's going to save the world either. I think that I am 100% supportive of people being able to practice vegan if they want to. But again, the problem is a lot of vegans don't want to afford that luxury to myself and others to say, look, we just want to eat more meat and do things that make us healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's like very interesting that the following question, have you ever met somebody turning back from carnivore to vegan and telling you?
I have not. Not that I've heard people say that I ate a lot of meat and I went vegan. I've heard those people, but when you sort of drill down it and say, well, what else were you eating? Well, I was eating other stuff too. Maybe that will happen someday. It doesn't seem to be. I mean, I seem to see really a lot of people when they leave veganism, a lot of them are like, they run screaming from it because they notice how bad it is and they really go back to it. Occasionally you see somebody that goes vegan and back and forth, but most of the time, once a vegan quits, they never go back to veganism because it's been a bad health experience to them. I do see people that do carnivore and then they quit for whatever reason. They went to a birthday party and got hooked back up on the sweet foods and things like that, or somebody that just for whatever reason says I need more variety, and that's fine. But they always sort of stay close to carnivore. Whereas I think a lot of vegans that do veganism, all of a sudden they're like, I want nothing to do with that anymore. So it's an interesting thing. So I've not seen a legitimate carnivore, go to veganism. Maybe it exists, but I've not seen it.
I think so too, because the people who have come to carnivore, they know about the benefits of animal foods, the benefits of animal fats, and as soon as you have looked over the border or looked out of the box, you never look back. I think that's the reason why we don't find any former carnivores turning to vegan, right? Mm.
Yeah, another question about ideologies. So, do you think that vegan ideologies right now only spread because individuals connect and start proposing them outside, or do you think there's a higher level ingraining those ideologies into the brains of some individuals? And what are there any maybe financial conflicts behind that?
Yeah. Well, I think veganism started, I think, back in 1944. A fellow in England, started the term veganism, and I think for many, many years it was really truly a grassroots movement, a sort of an ethical belief that we're doing less harm, and that's our thing. But that has been co-opted in a very big way by corporations now, and so they're sort of adopting that message because they think they're going to create this new market of highly processed foods. We see the alternative meat proteins that are being pushed. We see sort of this, attempt to, there was a recent study came out that showed that of all the populations, who eats the most ultra-processed food, it was the people that were vegans, and then vegetarians, and then finally meat eaters. And so there's this belief that if we can get people to stop eating animal products, whether it be dairy, whether it be milk, or meat, or like, back when we had butter and they tried to replace it with margarine, that's what will happen, and those things are very profitable. There is the ability to make cheap and almost print food. Some people call it fiat food. We can just kind of print food at a very high degree, whereas producing animal food takes a lot more time and effort and resource to produce that high quality food. So we can replace it with this very cheap but yet highly profitable food that will enrich a very small number of people, and largely, it'll kind of drive this status quo of people eating bad food, getting sick, needing to take medication, and that's a whole other sort of industry there. The medical industry is really what it is. It's a business to make a lot of money. It's not, the primary mission isn't really to help people, which you think it should be. It's basically about making money. And so and I know this term sounds bad, I use vegans as kind of useful idiots for this, this corporate sort of push, and they're being manipulated and used as sort of pawns in this game of, just seceding control and personal choice and freedom. You become dependent upon the system, and you feel like you're hopeless, and so you're dependent upon your doctor to prescribe you drugs, and you're addicted to these awful foods that are intentionally created to be addictive. I talked to a woman who worked in the food industry as a chemical engineer. Her job was literally to make the food as addictive as possible. Mm-hmm. And she told me she regretted it, and she wanted to come work for our company for free, in fact, because she was so guilty about the fact that we're doing that. And so we're seeing this, anytime I see made with plants or plant powered. All I see is cheap and profitable. That's really what I see when I see those ingredients. And so I think, unfortunately, some of the vegans that initially did this in a belief that they were doing the right thing, and that's fine that they believe that. They may be misguided in that, but that I think they truly believe that is now being overtaken by this corporate push.
Are there plans for a World Carnivore Festival in USA?
I don't know. I don't have any. We have World Carnivore Month every year, and so that's a thing that starts in January. But that would be a good idea. We could perhaps do that. We'll have to see how things go as things progress. But look, I'm sitting here in Germany speaking to people about carnivore in Germany, which would not have been possible even 5 years ago. 10 years ago, certainly not. So it is growing. I just did a conference in India. I was on a television show in France. So the movement is growing throughout the world. There's no doubt about it. And so we'll see that. I think the thing that grows carnivore is not some ideology. It's because it actually works. It works very well for a lot of people, and it's ultimately about health. And so there's not sort of the ideology that's attached to sort of veganism, where if you say you want to have a piece of fruit, I could care less. It doesn't matter to me. But if, as a vegan, I would say, well, I'm going to have a few eggs, all of a sudden I get everybody hates me.
Right. We're not dogmatic.
So there's not the dogmatism, but the growth is and it's accelerating. I've just in the last year I've noticed that just the number of people talking about doing it, the articles in the press, and it's still mostly negative in the press. We see the mainstream there. As they attack it more and more, I think more people are getting. It's like almost like all press is good press, even though if it's negative press, we get more exposure, and the more exposure this sort of movement gets, the more people are going to try it, and once you try it, you see that it's actually quite effective.
Yeah. Yes, and that would be actually. I mean, this podcast is a sign that we're getting the world tribe together, the world carnivore tribe more and more, and maybe in the future we will really be able to have more and more, over regional meetings and how would you say? Get-togethers or whatever. Meetups, right? Yeah. Of course, meetup. Yeah, and what you just said that the studies are so negative about meat, and it's very important that people like you, as you just recently published, and also last year you published something about just trying to
set the record straight. Rebuttal.
Rebuttal those studies, those papers, and Zoe Haircom just did that too, I think, with one about type 2 diabetes and meat. Meat as a cause of type 2 diabetes, that's really important that we work on that too, So that's great that you do that.
Yeah, studies is a good topic. Have you done any studies with all the carnivores that you know, or do you have any studies in plan?
So when you talk about specifically diabetes, without exaggeration, every day I see people going carnivore and they basically reverse their diabetes. Their hemoglobin A1C normalizes, their blood glucose normalizes, they're able to come off medications. And so to suggest that red meat is a cause of diabetes is clearly wrong. And Zoe Harcom's analysis of that study, they included lasagna and sandwiches as red meat, and you're like, well, that's a little bit odd. And then all of the people in the high red meat category were also overweight, smoking and drinking, which they didn't correct for, and they failed to account for how much sugar and grain the people were eating. So it's obviously a very flawed study, but it got headlines. It got international headlines, and it goes into that. And, a proper study would say, well, let's take people that are on a carnivore diet. They're eating pretty much just meat for the most part, that are diabetic, and see what happens to them. And I'm pretty confident, almost 99% confident, they would sort of see their diabetes get better. So that goes to heart. And yes, I'm working with research groups to get some of the studies performed because we need interventional trials. The Harvard study, which was done in 2021 by Belinda Lennertz and David Ludwig, was a survey, so it's not an interventional trial, but the survey data suggested that there was 2,000 people that were doing carnivore for at least 6 months, 226 I think were diabetic, And of those that were type 2 diabetics, 92% were able to come off all their insulin, 100% were able to come off all their other medications, injectable medications like GLP-1 receptor agonists and SGLT2 inhibitors, and 84% come off oral meds. And so there are, like I said, there's quite a bit of data out there if you look at it, particularly with a carnivore, because if you're on a vegan diet and your vegan diet was just Oreo cookies and Coca-Cola, and you had bad health outcomes, everybody would say that's preposterous. That's not what a vegan diet is, right? But at the same time, when we look at studies on meat eaters, it's people that are eating their meals from McDonald's with French fries and Coca-Colas and buns and all the seed oil and all this stuff that people just assume that the cause is the meat, where it's pretty clear to me it's not. So yeah, we do need to get more studies done.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh goodness, I will probably be doing much of what I'm doing today. I think that I think this needs many years to fully reach. Hopefully, I will be looking back at how successful our company is at having hopefully helped millions of people get off medications. I mean that's the main focus right now and not necessarily just with a carnivore diet, but I think nutrition in general. I'm a physician, and so when we go back to what are we doing in medicine, particularly in the United States, where we spend in excess of $4 trillion every year for chronic disease, and we have had no good results. I mean, we've gone backwards, and so hopefully I'll be part of the paradigm shift that has changed the way we practice medicine, because medicine is supposed to be about providing health and not just managing diseases, which we've kind of devolved into. And so that's, like I said, I'll be 62 then. So hopefully still an athlete, still doing the stuff. And, but yeah, I don't see, stepping away from what I'm doing now. I think I'll still be a very big proponent of this way of eating and just keeping meat in the human diet, because I think getting away from that is going to be a big problem. We think we have problems now. I know, like I said, I know I'm in Germany where you're just at the front of what we're at. You're about 10, 15 years behind where we are in the United States when it comes to chronic disease, and to think that we have 25% of the population on mental health drugs. It's just amazing. You think that, and those we have almost 75% of our population is either obese or overweight. It's incredible. So hopefully we've reversed that trend. That's the hope.
Yeah, same with me, and the same with me. Also thinking about where am I in 5 years? If I think this is in German you say Berufung. I don't know what you say in English. It's like
a life quest.
A life quest. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
Life purpose.
To just continue.
Raison d'être.
Pardon?
French, no.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So well, thank you very much that you've been here, and we could have a private interview with the camera lying on your bed. Really funny that getting so close together. It's a lot of fun, and we're curious to hear your speech this afternoon, and we're looking forward to your further stay. Yeah. Okay. And thank you guys for listening, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Jetzt bin ich aber echt knallrot, oder?
Vorne.
Das ist eine gesunde Gesichtsfarbe.
Ja, das ist immer
Kommt gerade aus
schön.
dem Urlaub.
Andere bezahlen dafür.
B-Vitamine.
Okay.
Pass auf, Klappe die dritte.
Klappe die dritte.
Good Iron
Das kommt dann in die
Wir
Outtakes.
gehen schon mal
Okay.
trinken.
Ja. Also.
Und hier unser Haftungsausschluss. Alle Inhalte im Podcast werden von uns mit größter Sorgfalt recherchiert und publiziert. Dennoch übernehmen wir keine Haftung für die Richtigkeit, Vollständigkeit oder Aktualität der Informationen. Sie stellen unsere persönliche, subjektive Meinung dar und ersetzen auch keine medizinische Diagnose oder ärztliche Beratung. Dasselbe gilt für unsere Gäste. Konsultieren Sie bei Fragen oder Beschwerden immer Ihren behandelnden Arzt.